The throbbing pain in her temple was the first thing Clara felt, a sharp stab that seemed to echo a forgotten nightmare, or perhaps a real blow. The heavy body and a buzz in her ears, like the soft whisper of a distant sea, gave way to a disturbing lightness, as if she were floating in a sea of cotton, soft and dense at the same time. The second was the silky touch of sheets she never imagined could exist, finer than any piece of clothing she had ever owned, sliding against her skin in an almost strange way, a sensation that didn't belong to her world. Opening her eyes, she was greeted by a high ceiling adorned with frescoes that narrated idyllic pastoral scenes, with chubby angels and nymphs dancing in heavenly gardens, and walls lined with brocade silk in shades of ivory and gold, shimmering softly under the light that entered through the windows. The air, heavy with the unmistakable aroma of fresh lilies and the old scent of polished mahogany, contrasted drastically with the smell of mold and sewage that came from the alley of her small one-bedroom apartment, a room that screamed luxury in every detail, every antique piece of furniture, every art object arranged with an almost military precision, as if each piece told a story of opulence and power that Clara couldn't decipher. A carved marble dresser housed a bohemian crystal vase, while on the walls, oiled portraits of unknown figures watched her with an air of severity. Her heart, once a slow and regular drum in her chest, began to beat faster, a frantic rhythm of alarm, as she noticed that she wasn't wearing her simple, worn-out clothes, the faded jeans and t-shirt she wore for work, but a satin nightgown that fell softly over her body, embroidered with delicate lace and tiny pearls. A shiver ran down her spine, mixing with the coolness of the fabric. How did she end up here? The last clear memory was of working late at the diner, cleaning tables and sweeping the floor, feeling a sudden dizziness, an overwhelming exhaustion before fainting on the sidewalk, the street dark and lonely. Had it been an accident, a rescue, or something much more sinister? As she touched her neck, she felt a small, cold, heavy, and intricately forged gold locket that she had never seen before. Her fingers ran over the smooth, cold surface until they found an engraved symbol she didn't recognize, but that seemed strangely familiar, like something out of a dream. A stylized lion intertwined with a serpent, both appearing to roar in silence, an image of strength and mystery. It was heavy, ancient, and seemed to pulse with a secret of its own, almost a vibrant energy. The bedroom door opened softly, without the slightest creak, revealing a lady in an impeccable uniform, with a perfectly styled bun and a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes, but which seemed to be part of her uniform. She was pushing a silver tea cart that gleamed under the morning sunlight, with fine porcelain cups and a steaming teapot. "Good morning, Miss. I hope you had an excellent night's rest. Breakfast is served. Your fiancé, Mr. Sterling, is waiting for you for the final dress, fitting in an hour. The wedding is in 10 days. The lady's voice was calm and controlled, but the speed with which the words fiancé and wedding were spoken made Clara's blood run cold. The words fell on Clara like blocks of ice, each one crushing her former reality, fiancé's wedding. She blinked, struggling to process the information, as if her brain refused to accept this new reality. I don't understand." Her voice came out raspy, almost an inaudible whisper. Who is Mr. Sterling? Where am I? I'm not engaged to anyone." The lady's smile hardened minimally, a small crack in her facade of perfection, her patience seeming tested. "Why, miss, what a strange question. Mr. Gabriel Sterling, your fiancé, the CEO of Sterling Enterprises, and you are at the Sterling Mansion. Of course, everything is being prepared for the big day. There are only 10 days to organize. Miss, we can't waste time." The lady moved with an alarming efficiency, pulling the curtains wide with a fluid motion, flooding the room with daylight, and revealing immense gardens outside, with bubbling fountains and perfectly trimmed topiaries. It was a dreamlike landscape, but for Clara, it was a prison. Clara's humble and predictable world, where every penny was hard-earned, and every day a battle for survival, had been shattered by an awakening in a golden nightmare. The feeling of being trapped, of being an intruder in her own life, in her own skin, began to solidify. The locket on her neck seemed to weigh A ton. A mysterious link to a reality she didn't understand. A puzzle that screamed for a solution. Where were her simple clothes? Her keys? Her backpack with her few belongings? Her life? Everything seemed to have been erased, replaced by this new existence of luxury and imprisonment. She felt a pang of panic, an uncontrollable urge to scream and run, but the cold, implacable gaze of the lady made her swallow and kept her motionless. She needed to stay calm, at least for now. Her survival instincts, honed by years of hardship, screamed at her not to show weakness. DIC fiancé, the outdated agreement, and the subtle fear he shared the first meeting with Gabriel Sterling was as shocking as the awakening, an abrupt immersion into a universe of power and coldness that left her breathless. He was the personification of the elite, tall, with broad shoulders and a posture that exuded authority, like a king on his throne. His impeccably tailored suit seemed molded to every muscle of his athletic body, an expensive armor that concealed what was inside. His eyes, an icy blue like an iceberg, seemed to analyze every imperfection, every inch of her, as if Clara were an object, a work of art, to be appraised by an unscrupulous auctioneer. No emotion showed on his sculpted face. His thin lips barely moved as he explained the agreement in a monotonous tone that chilled Clara to the core, a lifeless sound that was almost as cold as his gaze. "Miss Santos," he began, without even a hint of a personal greeting, without a good morning or a pleasure to meet you, as if she were an obligation on his busy schedule. "This is not a marriage of affection, nor of choice, but of unavoidable necessity. It is a contract that transcends generations, an ancient pact that dates back centuries, sealing a merger of empires under the guise of an arranged marriage between the Sterling family and, surprisingly, the family that was once yours. The Santos family. Surprising because your lineage is considered minor now, a shadow of what it once was. But the contract is old, immutable, and unbreakable." The word minor hit her like a slap, a humiliation that ignited a spark of rebellion in her chest. But the biggest shock was the mention of her family, a name she barely knew, as her mother had cut all ties with the past a long time ago, always speaking vaguely about old problems and people who weren't worth it. He continued, impassive, like an ice statue, while the servants around them seemed invisible, obedient ghosts who moved in absolute silence. "You are the key to protecting my family's interests and yours. I must admit, although you may not understand the extent of it now, no objection will be tolerated. The deadline is not just 10 days, Clara. There is a financial penalty clause attached to every hour that passes until the wedding. An exorbitant, incalculable amount for ordinary minds, which makes escape not only a dishonor for both families, an indelible stain on their names, but an almost unimaginable financial ruin, not only for Sterling Enterprises, which could rebuild, but for any remnant of a connection your family may have to assets or name, annihilating them from the face of society." His voice was a calculating whisper that promised disaster, a sharp velvet blade that cut without leaving visible marks. Clara felt like a chess piece on a board of giants, manipulated by invisible hands, without understanding the rules of the game, or the extent of the power of this man who seemed to have the world at his feet. Every word Gabriel uttered seemed to handcuff her even more to a life that wasn't hers, an existence of empty opulence. However, as he spoke about the weight of generations and the inevitability of their fate, Clara caught an almost imperceptible glimpse, a crack in his icy armor, a flash of despair in his cold eyes, an almost invisible twitch in his jaw, as if he were holding back a deep pain. He seemed as much a prisoner as she was, perhaps even more so, trapped by a legacy he didn't choose, by a web of ancestral obligations. That small crack in Gabriel's icy armor awakened a dangerous curiosity in Clara, a desire to understand. She wasn't the only piece in this game. Perhaps he was also suffering under the weight of that centuries-old contract. And what exactly did her family, the Santos, have to do with the Sterlings? And why did the name seem to carry so much weight, despite her own humble life, where she barely made ends meet? The curiosity began to override the fear, a dangerous and intoxicating invitation to unravel the secrets of that man and her own origin. The first cracks and an unexpected, familiar face from the past despite the constant surveillance that surrounded her discreet and silent security guards in every corner of the mansion, blending into the architecture like living statues, servants who seemed to have eyes everywhere. With curious and sometimes suspicious looks, Clara's fighting mind refused to be a puppet on a stage that was not her own. Brain, accustomed to solving problems quickly and improvising at the diner to deal with difficult customers and unexpected situations, began to work tirelessly. She observed every detail, every gesture, every hesitation of the servants. She listened to the whispers that spread through the vast kitchens and labyrinthine corridors, looking for inconsistencies, for clues about her own identity and why she was there, trapped in a golden cage. She noticed Gabriel's distant gaze at times, a deep melancholy that contrasted violently with his public image as a ruthless as if he were always somewhere else, haunted by a ghost from the past that only he could see. On a rainy afternoon, with a gray sky pouring down in curtains of water over the gardens, bored with the monotonous routine of dress fittings, etiquette lessons, and formal dinners that seemed endless, she asked for permission to go to the library. The place was vast and dusty, a sanctuary of forgotten knowledge, with dark mahogany shelves that stretched to the vaulted ceiling, filled with ancient tomes on history, economics, politics, and, curiously, an entire section dedicated to the heraldry and genealogy of noble American families. The smell of old paper and leather comforted her in a strange way, a remnant of normality in her chaos. While she was absently handling old objects and in books printed before 1501, she felt something hard behind a volume on the history of the States. It was a dusty photo album, with a cracked and faded leather cover, exuding an air of abandonment. The yellowed pages revealed scenes from a life she had never known. One of the images, already faded by time, showed a younger Gabriel, almost a teenager, with an open and genuine smile, an expression of joy that she had never seen on his current face. He was next to a woman. But the shock came when she noticed the unsettling resemblance. The woman in the photo was almost identical to her, with the same large, expressive, deep brown eyes, the same delicate curve of the nose, and, most chillingly, the exact shape of a small birthmark just below her left ear, which Clara also possessed. Clara's heart raced, a confused and astonished rhythm. On the back of the photo, elegant handwriting, already faded by humidity and time, said only, "My dear Amelia, 1998. The name Amelia echoed in Clara's mind, an unknown symphony that seemed to awaken a vague echo in her memory, like a forgotten song. Who was Amelia? Why was she so similar to Clara, like a twin lost in time? And why was Gabriel, a man with such controlled and distant behavior, keeping a photo of someone who looked like a mirror image of his future fiancée with a date so old, from almost 2 decades ago? Subtle clues, like breadcrumbs in a dark forest, began to weave a web of mysteries that suggested that the fiancé himself might be as much of a victim as she was, trapped by a past she didn't even know. Her presence there was much more than a mere coincidence orchestrated by an ancient contract. It was a link to something that preceded her, something sinister. Clara's curiosity, once a mere desire to escape and resume her simple life, transformed into a burning thirst to unravel that enigma, to discover who Amelia was and her connection to the Sterling family and, more importantly, to herself. She felt that Amelia was the key to everything, and the locket on her neck, with the lion and serpent symbol, suddenly seemed to connect to that old photograph in a way that both terrified and fascinated her. The shadow friend from the past, and the unexpected encrypted warning message. During one of the rare permitted outings, a gala charity event for high society, a show of ostentation by the Sterling family at the luxurious Grand Palace Hotel, where diamonds shone brighter than stars and champagne flowed like a river, Clara was under the close watch of security guards. They were silent, almost imperceptible, but omnipresent shadows, making her feel like an exotic bird in a golden cage, displayed for the world. While trying to disguise her unease, feigning interest in the jewels displayed in armored glass cases, and smiling for the photographers who harassed her, she glimpsed a familiar face in the crowd, as unlikely as a miracle in her current nightmare, Edward Santos. He was a ghost from her previous life, a childhood friend with whom she had shared dreams and peanut butter sandwiches, who had disappeared without a trace years ago, supposedly to work abroad. He saw her from across the room, and the surprise in his eyes quickly turned into a cold understanding, almost a recognition of an imminent danger that surrounded them. An almost imperceptible nod. Clara felt a shiver. The opportunity arose when one of the security guards was distracted for a moment by the loud noise of a nearby camera flash. Edward, with surprising agility and a dissimulation that Clara had never seen in him, approached Clara, acting as if he were a dazzled fan asking for an autograph from the future Mrs. Sterling. He extended his hand with a pen and a business card from a technology company Clara had never heard of, but instead of a pen, he slipped a small silver metal brooch with a symbol of a silver butterfly into her palm, squeezing it briefly with a firm and significant grip. "Clara, it's you. You look stunning tonight, Miss Santos. It's an honor to meet you." Excitedly to disguise his true intention, his professional smile hiding the urgency in his eyes. "Then," he whispered, his voice almost inaudible, "remember, the butterfly always returns to its cocoon. Always. Trust your instincts. Beware of Helen," the phrase they used in childhood to indicate imminent danger or a plan of escape that needed to be activated, now carried a dark weight. The brooch was an object he always wore in his school bag, a symbol of their friendship and their detective games, a secret code between them. He was the only link to her former life, the only person who seemed to believe in the impossibility of her new reality. Clara felt a glimmer of hope, a small flame lit in the darkness, but also a growing apprehension. What was Edward hiding that allowed him to be so close to the Sterling's inner circle, frequenting the same type of high society event? He seemed to have changed, matured, but his eyes still had that sparkle of unwavering loyalty she knew so well. However, the way he infiltrated, the encrypted message, and the fact that he was there, in the midst of the elite she was now forced to belong to, raised a series of disturbing questions. Edward, her friend from the diner, was moving in circles she never would have imagined, and he clearly had information she didn't possess. She squeezed the brooch in her hand, feeling the silver butterfly in her palm, a vivid reminder of what she had lost and the danger that surrounded her. He was a light in the darkness. Yes, but that light also carried shadows, and Clara wondered to what extent she could truly trust him, or if he too was a piece in a bigger game, manipulating her for his own ends. The curiosity about Edward's involvement with the Sterling family became a new mystery to be unraveled. The secret melody, a vague nightmare, and the forgotten clue under the camellias as the days passed, each one more suffocating than the last. Clara's curiosity about Gabriel deepened, transforming into a silent obsession. She realized that, behind the facade of a ruthless CEO and the controlled posture, there was a man who was hiding from the world, perhaps even from himself, like a wounded animal that retreats into its lair. He was an enigma, and Clara, no matter how much she tried to resist, felt drawn to decipher him. On a late afternoon, with the sun painting the sky in shades of orange and violet, while she was exploring the less-used corners of the Manchona, neglected winter garden, with exotic plants slowly dying from lack of care, covered by a thin layer of dust, she heard a melancholic piano melody. The notes were complex, full of pain and longing, but incredibly beautiful, like a lament coming from the soul, breaking the heavy silence of the house. Following the sound, she found Gabriel in a little-used, almost hidden room, an imposing and dusty grand piano in the center, the keys yellowed by time. With his eyes closed, the expression on his face was one of pure agony, each key seeming to extract a part of his soul, a pain so deep it was palpable. When he saw her, he stopped abruptly, the music being cut in the middle of a phrase, his hands hovering over the keyboard as if they had been burned. The mask of coldness returned to its place in an instant, as if he were ashamed of having been caught in such an intimate moment of vulnerability. But Clara had seen. He wasn't just a cold and calculating man. He was a man marked by loss and trauma, a prisoner of his own pain. He gestured to a specific area of the winter garden, a bed where only white camellias bloomed, strangely isolated from the rest of the dying plants, like an oasis of life in the midst of decay. "It was here that ... that I lost her. My first wife, Amelia. She loved these flowers more than anything. This melody. It was our song, the one I played for her on every anniversary, the one I played on the day. On the day she left, his voice, for the first time, broke, filled with a palpable pain, with a sadness that seemed to have never healed. A solitary tear ran down his face before being quickly wiped away. At that moment Clara's initial attraction to him, mixed with a hint of revulsion for his initial behavior, began to mix with a strange and deep compassion. She realized that the melody was strangely familiar, like an echo of a distant nightmare she couldn't decipher. It wasn't the first time she had heard it. In air dreams, which had become more vivid and disturbing since she woke up in the mansion, that same melody haunted her, accompanied by fragmented images and the white camellias. She remembered a vivid dream of a woman in a white dress, with long dark hair, wrapped in a sea of camellias, falling from a marble staircase. That image, a vague memory or a terrifying premonition, made her blood run cold. Suddenly, her eyes fell on a small, half-buried object in the camellia bed, almost hidden by the withered leaves. A small wooden box, aged by time and humidity, with the same intricate symbol as the locket on her neck, the lion and the serpent. Gabriel, who had turned his back to her, trying to recompose his facade, didn't notice the object. Clara, with her heart pounding in her chest, disguised herself and lightly stepped on the box, bearing it again under the leaves, trying to hide her discovery before he noticed. What did Amelia have to do with that symbol? And what could that box contain? The web of mysteries was becoming more and more tangled, and Clara felt more and more involved in it, like a spider in her own trap, but with the chance to turn the game around. Helen's dirty game and the unexpected poisonous doubt. Helen Sterling, the cold and calculating matriarch, with her snake-like smile and eyes that evaluated everything with surgical precision, noticed the growing and dangerous closeness between Clara and Gabriel. Her son's coldness, which she had cultivated for years as a virtue, was breaking under Clara's gaze, and this threatened her meticulously constructed plans, like a house of cards about to collapse. She couldn't allow emotion, that dangerous and uncontrollable feeling, to ruin her goals of power and control. She called Clara for tea in the main hall, a spectacle of ostentation where every Limoges porcelain and every gleaming silver utensil seemed to mock Clara's simple life, a constant reminder of her humble origin. Helen, sitting with the impeccable posture of a queen on her throne, took a sip of her exotic herbal tea, while Clara could barely touch hers, her throat dry with apprehension. With a smile that didn't reach her eyes, a mere soulless lip movement, Helen slid a state-of-the-art tablet to Clara. The bright screen showed a series of bank statements, with voluminous transfers to accounts in tax havens, and photos of Edward in secret nighttime meetings, in dark alleys and in private rooms of underground casinos, with well-known figures from the city's financial underworld. He appeared betting large sums in card games, talking to men in dark suits and with evasive looks, with an air of familiarity that Clara would never expect. "Your friend isn't who you think he is, darling. He's a slippery, unscrupulous opportunist. He's only here to take advantage of your innocence and, even more, of the sterling fortune." "Look at this statement, Clara." Helen pointed to a specific transfer, highlighted in red, the exact amount your mother needed to pay off her gambling debts years ago, when you were still a child, a trifle for someone with the right contacts. Edward is a wolf in sheep's clothing, and it seems your mother wasn't very different, was she? The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, my dear. The mention of her mother's gambling debts, a shameful secret that Clara thought no one knew, gave a chilling credibility to Helen's lies. Her mother, a figure Clara loved unconditionally, but who was always marked by a deep sadness and certain problems she never explained, had hidden a lot from Clara. The vivid memory of her mother breaking down in silent tears over money problems and the urgency to pay certain people suddenly made sense, a painful link to the past. Had Edward deceived her? Was he really involved in something so dirty, or was he also trapped in a web of blackmail? Like herself, the seed of doubt had been planted in Clara's heart, and she felt nauseous, torn between loyalty to a friend from the past and the growing, albeit reluctant trust in Gabriel. She needed to confirm, but who could she really trust? Helen was a master of manipulation, but the frightening precision of her information about Clara's past was disturbing. The game wasn't just about the wedding. It was about buried truths, old betrayals, and the true nature of everyone around her. Edward's secrets, the old promise, and the warning sign of rebellion. Clara, feeling suffocated by doubt and the bitter feeling of betrayal, with the small butterfly brooch in her hand squeezed like a talisman, confronted Edward in a secret meeting he had orchestrated, away from Helen's eyes. He had managed to get access to a small, isolated guest house on the property, claiming to be a potential supplier for a future Sterling event. His face, once so open and trustworthy, now seemed like a mask of secrets, marked by deep, dark circles and a visible tension. He, pressured and seeing the pain and fury in her, the pain of a friendship put to the test, revealed his own secrets, each word a new weight in his already complicated web of lies. His family, in fact, had been destroyed in a scandal involving the Sterling Company years ago. It wasn't just a fraudulent scheme, it was a meticulous and cruel plan orchestrated by Helen to dispossess small rural properties, including those of his parents, who were farmers and owned lands that, later, would prove to be valuable for the expansion of Sterling's business. They didn't just steal our land, Clara. They destroyed my father. He refused to sell, fought with all his might, and he was framed for something he didn't do. He died of heartbreak, of a heart broken by injustice. I was just a child, but I swore revenge. I came to expose the truth behind the Sterling's facade of power and charity, to bring justice to my father's memory. His help to Clara, he confessed, was not purely altruistic, although the genuine friendship and affection for her still existed and were strong. He saw her as a way to get privileged information, a gateway to get closer to Helen and her empire. The most shocking thing, however, was his next confession. It was me who took you to the Sterling mansion on the night of your awakening. Clara, I rescued you from a dangerous place, a remote, isolated clandestine clinic in the mountains, where Helen had kept you sedated for years. She wanted to silence you, to control you, so you wouldn't discover the truth about your inheritance. She feared what you might find out. I brought you here, believing that by keeping you close to the Sterlings, you would be safer, under my radar, while I unraveled the truth completely. He explained that the locket she was wearing was proof of an ancient oath between the Santos and Sterling families, a pact of mutual protection that had been broken, and that the butterfly on the brooch was not just a symbol of their friendship, but of a secret alliance of resistance against the tyranny of the Sterlings, assigned for others who sought justice. Your mother, Clara, wasn't a compulsive gambler, as Helen wants you to believe. She was a victim, a strong woman who tried to protect you at all costs. Helen used those supposed gambling debts as a facade to blackmail her and force her to sign documents, giving up the inheritance that was rightfully yours, the true Santos fortune. She was trying to protect you from all this, so you could have a normal life, far from this darkness. Your mother hid the locket in a safe place before she was silenced. I only arrived too late to save her, but in time to save you. Edward's words were a punch to Clara's gut, a whirlwind of emotions. Clara's heart ached. She was surrounded by secrets and manipulations. Not knowing who to truly trust, the line between loyalty and freedom became thinner and thinner. Now, with the bitter taste of betrayal coming from all sides, even from her own family, whom she thought she knew, the piano melody of Gabriel, the recurring dream with Amelia, the camellias, the locket. Everything was starting to fit into a deadly puzzle, and Edward was a key piece. But his presence, there was a double-edged sword. The shared confession, the fabricated accident, and the true hidden inheritance, with only 2 days left until the wedding. The tension in the mansion was palpable, like a violin string stretched to the maximum, about to snap with the slightest pressure. Gabriel, visibly disturbed, with the facade of a ruthless CEO and the armor visibly broken, called Clara to his office. The environment was somber, lit only by an old lamp that barely dissipated the dancing shadows in the corners of the room, creating an atmosphere of confession and secrecy. The words came out of him in a hesitant but sincere flow, as if he were taking a huge weight off his soul, a burden that had oppressed him for years. "Clara," he began, his voice hoarse with repressed emotion, his posture tense. The wedding isn't just a corporate agreement. It's an obligation imposed by my mother, Helen. A sacrifice she forced me to make to protect the company from a scandal involving my family's dark past and, shockingly, your mysterious disappearance, Clara, years ago. She has a control over me that I've only started to understand now. It's a web of blackmail and guilt that she has woven. He paused, his icy blue eyes, now open in vulnerability, fixed on hers, seeking understanding, or perhaps forgiveness. My mother forged the accident that took the life of my first wife, Amelia. It wasn't an accident, Clara. It was a brutal murder. Amelia was investigating the truth about your family's inheritance, the Santos. She discovered that your mother, the true heiress of the Santos, had been blackmailed by Helen to give up a hidden fortuna collection of rare lands and mineral exploration rights, vastly underestimated and of invaluable worth to Sterling Enterprises in exchange for her and your safety. Helen wanted this wealth, and Amelia, with her passion for justice, was about to expose everything. Gabriel continued, his voice filled with bitterness and regret. When Amelia was accidentally silenced, your mother, fearing for her life and yours, tried to flee with you to a place where Helen would never find you. But Helen is relentless. She found them to silence you and have total control over this inheritance which now, by right, is yours. Clara Shia kept you hidden and sedated for years in a clandestine clinic, an isolated institution where patients disappeared. She erased your memory, using drugs and manipulation, so that you could be presented as the perfect bride for an old contract. Without questioning, without remembering what had happened, he made a gesture of disbelief. Edward, your friend, was the one who found you there and brought you here. He believed that, by keeping you close to the Sterlings, you would be safer to unravel the truth, and he could also get closer to Helen for his own revenge. And she's using you, Clara, because you are the only living heir to a part of this fortune, a secret your mother tried to protect until the end, before being forced to sign everything. I'm as much a prisoner as you are, Gabriel concluded, his voice failing, the tears in his eyes now visible. I was forced to accept this marriage to protect the family's honor and empire, but in fact, I was a silent accomplice to her cruelty, manipulated by her brilliant and perverse mind. I saw you in Amelia's photos. Your resemblance haunted me, and I felt a strange attraction, a connection I didn't understand. I knew something was wrong, but my mother made me believe that I was protecting Sterling Enterprises from a lunatic who wanted to destroy everything, and that you were Amelia's reincarnation, a sign. She took advantage of my pain and my grief to control me. At that moment, loyalty versus freedom transformed into an even greater dilemma: to run away alone, ignoring the injustice and Gabriel's pain, leaving him behind to face the consequences, or to fight alongside the man who, against all odds, and despite everything that had happened, was beginning to love, and who had revealed why she was there, to inherit a fortune that linked her to the tragic past of his first wife. And that could be the key to unmasking Helen once and for all. The wooden box that Clara had found in Amelia's garden, and which she now hid under the loose floorboards of her own room, suddenly seemed like the final link, the irrefutable proof of everything Gabriel had told her, a testament to the legacy and the danger, the unraveled truth, the deep connection, and the dangerous legacy that challenged time. The pieces, once scattered and confusing like shards of glass on a dark floor, began to fit together with frightening precision, revealing a complete picture of betrayal and manipulation that extended for decades. With the information from Gabriel, who now acted not only as her accomplice, but as her most intimate confidant, and her own investigations, guided by strange intuitions and vivid dreams, Clara unraveled the entirety of the truth, which was much more complex and nefarious than she imagined. The wooden box found in the winter garden, which she had hidden and then opened in the dead of night, contained not only ancient documents, but diaries of her mother, letters from Amelia Sterling, and an intricate map of a remote area in the States, with detailed markings of rare mineral deposits and invaluable properties, all belonging to the Santos family. Her mother, years earlier, had been not only the guardian of a vast estate, but also of a rare collection of historical documents from the Santos family, which included irrefutable proof of a billion-dollar fraud committed by the Sterling family in the past. This fraud involved the illegal purchase of land from small farmers and the improper exploitation of precious minerals, accumulating an illicit fortune. Gabriel's father, the Sterling patriarch, not only her mother's lover, but also a secret conspirator against Helen, his wife, had tried to use this hidden Santos's inheritance as leverage to bring down Helen and assume total control of the family business, purging it of her dark practices. However, Helen, with a sharp mind and her network of informants, discovered the plot and acted first, eliminating her husband and silencing Clara's mother. The marriage, then, was not just a way to silence Clara or to fulfill an old contract, but a diabolical way for Helen to legitimize the theft of the Santos inheritance. Gabriel's father had, before his own mysterious death, which Gabriel now strongly suspected was not natural, but another of Helen's machinations, secretly altered the terms of the centuries-old contract. This alteration meant that the vast Santos inheritance could only be accessed by a direct descendant of the Santos, that is, Clara through marriage to a Sterling. Helen wanted to ensure that this wealth, which now, by right, belonged to Clara, would remain in the hands of the Sterlings, erasing the evidence of her crimes and consolidating her power. She used the secret of her mother's forced involvement with the fraud as blackmail leverage, and the supposed madness of Clara's mother to discredit her should Clara try to reveal the truth. The clandestine clinic was a prison and an instrument of torture for both. The identity and the truth that Clara so desperately sought were much darker and more deeply intertwined than she imagined. She wasn't just an arranged bride. She was the last piece of a deadly puzzle, the key to a dangerous legacy that deeply linked her past, her lineage, to that of the Sterling family, and to the tragic fate of Amelia herself. The symbol on the locket, the lion intertwined with the serpent, was not just the coat of arms of Amelia's family, the lions, but a testament to an ancestral oath of protection that Amelia's lineage had made to Clara's lineage, the guardians of the serpent, centuries ago, protecting the secrets of the lands and their treasures. Amelia had tried to fulfill that oath, paying with her own life, and now, with her mother's memory and inheritance at stake, it was Clara's turn. The piano melody, the camellias, the dream Zevreath, was an echo of Amelia trying to guide her, to warn her of the danger and the destiny that united them. The climax at the altar, the explosion of truth, and the new alliance for justice. The wedding day arrived, but it would not be the fairy tale that Helen had meticulously planned, nor the event of power consecration she had expected. Clara, in her stunning dress, made of silk and French lace, walked down the long aisle of the opulent cathedral, each step a conscious decision, every fiber of her being pulsating with a mixture of panic, contained anger, and a new and unwavering determination. Gabriel's eyes, fixed on her from the altar, showed a mixture of despair and a newfound determination, a reflection of his own journey to freedom, a silent relief. The church was filled with members of high society, influential politicians, magnate businessmen, all there to witness the union of the Sterlings, and, as Helen had proudly announced to consolidate her public image, the main television networks were broadcasting the wedding of the year live to millions of homes, with helicopters flying over the cathedral. At the altar, under the cold and triumphant gaze of Helen Sterling, who was already savoring her victory, her almost predatory smile of satisfaction, Clara stopped. A few steps from Gabriel, she could feel the weight of the locket on her neck, the butterfly brooch on her wrist, and the weight of the documents hidden in the hem of her dress, each a fragment of the explosive truth that was about to be unleashed on the world. She exchanged a quick look with Gabriel, who nodded subtly, a silent sign that he was ready, that he would support her in her decision. Taking a deep breath, Clara held up the locket with the lion and serpent coat of arms for everyone to see, and with a clear and firm voice which echoed throughout the cathedral nave, amplified by the television microphones and resounding through the speakers in millions of homes, she began to speak. They were not wedding vows, but a devastating public denunciation. She revealed the web of corruption, blackmail, and extortion that Helen had woven for years. The brutal murder of Amelia Sterling's accident that never was the theft of her own family's inheritance. The Santos and Helen's Machiavellian intention to control her, to cover up her crimes. The guests At first dumbfounded and incredulous, began to whisper, the murmurs growing into an uncontrollable buzz, and chaos quickly ensued. The TV cameras, capturing every word, every reaction, turned what would have been a glamorous social event into an epic national scandal. Gabriel, with a look of approval and relief that Clara had never seen before, took her hand and, in front of all, declared his unbreakable alliance with her, not as a contract fiancé, but as a partner in the search for justice. He confirmed Clara's accusations, confessing that he had been blackmailed and manipulated by his own mother for years, and that he had finally freed himself from that invisible prison. The wedding farce collapsed in a pandemonium, screams, journalists crowding around, shocked guests. Helen, pale, and with her face disfigured by rage and the terror of being unmasked, tried to intervene, but it was too late. The authorities, previously alerted by Edward and Gabriel in a carefully orchestrated plan, acted quickly, confronting her at the altar and taking her away in handcuffs under the incessant flashes of the cameras. The Sterling Empire, built on generations of secrets, lies, and blood, began to crumble live for the whole world to watch. Clara and Gabriel would not flee. They united to bring down the tyranny, not only for their freedom, but for the justice of all who had been silenced and harmed. The game had changed forever, and they were playing to win, together, against a common enemy, ready to rebuild their lives on their own terms, upon the ruins of a corrupt empire. The story of Clara, the humble young woman who mysteriously woke up in a world of luxury, was not about an arranged marriage, but about the courage of a woman to unravel the truth, claim her legacy, and fight for her own freedom and for justice.